Vavi's perspective. Our remaining time at the weapons department felt deceptively lengthy, with every moment crawling by like a lazing Frovec worm. Throughout the entire thing, I couldn't help but dwell further upon Andrew's promise. If everything he had shown us so far wasn't real human weaponry, then what possibly could be? He did shrug off that bullet from the Rakasi. I recalled amidst my contemplation, turning his words over in mind a few times in tandem with that terrible scene. So what kind of gun could possibly kill a human? How powerful would that have to be? Finally, after at least half a segment, a little over the human hour, the scientists' excessive celebration of Andrew's design seemed to have died down just a bit. I couldn't fault their enthusiasm. For the first time in decades, life after the war seemed like a possibility. Tonight, Chot would be leaving to present the prototype to Zintral's emergency manufacturing facility, a place where prototypes like the Whitebird could be built in relatively large quantities. Modular assembly lines would allow for at least a few hundred these miracle guns within a handful of S3. From what I could gather by their radio conversation with Chot, the top military brass were thrilled by this breakthrough. It seemed like Andrew's translator would be reporting back to Salcom before his return to base, meaning he would be gone for a while. Before he left, however, Andrew had something to show us, something that may very have changed my entire outlook on humanity. Ominous silence reverberated between us three like an echo of absence as Andrew guided Chot and I back to his ship. To me, the image of humanity was that of an enlightened species. The way Andrew recoiled after taking life spoke of an exceptionally strong empathy response, something I imagined was shared by the rest of his people. In Kaffel society and throughout our history, the smaller-sized and slightly less feathered red-scale Kaffel were all too often regarded as inferior to blue scales like myself. In fact, the reason that Andrew hadn't met one yet by this point was because they weren't allowed into facilities like this. By contrast, human society had, in Andrew's time, successfully eradicated most such prejudices, with whatever small pockets of resistance remaining being in the vast minority. For these reasons and more, it was hard to imagine the human race as anything but ideal. Surely such a people would have cast aside their warlike ways centuries ago. Right? Trotting obediently up the ship's entrance ramp and stepping inside at the behest of our alien ally, we watched as the human hesitantly approached his computer and began to type in commands. Quickly navigating past the title screen, Andrew opened up a mysterious application, and the screen went black, momentarily showing us the reflection of his abnormally dour face. "I hope you two can understand why I didn't want to show you this," he sighed, pausing for a long while as the screen opened up to what looked like a sprawling library of pictures, from photographs to artworks. "Is this some kind of digital gallery?" Chot asked confusedly, his befuddlement mirroring my own. Perhaps humans were master propagandists, and their weapons were these artworks, or maybe some of these tiny pictures would be schematics for their real weapons. I had no way of knowing. At least, not until he finally clicked on one. To both myself and Chot's mutual surprise, the screen once more went black as a title card faded into view. The History of Warfare. Recordings of alien vehicles and weaponry flashed across the screen, each more advanced and impressive than the last. Overlaying this display was a deep, dramatic human voice. From our humble beginnings as a tribal species to the modern era of 2100, humans have been at war for thousands of years. Against the forces of nature and each other we have battled without end. And even in peaceful times, the shadow of war has been an ever-present force in our technological development. From the humble Atlatl the hydrogen bomb, join us today as we uncover the secrets of military dominance throughout history. Even within their humble beginnings, it was clear that human weaponry had developed differently than that of the Kaffel. Whereas our weapons were primarily blunted in order to break bones and damage organs. In fact, slings were a technology we and the humans had shockingly similar designs for. Most human weapons were instead focused on piercing the skin and inflicting external bleeding. Unlike our bones, which were largely hollow in order to carry extra blood, human bones were almost entirely solid. That was why Andrew was able to shrug off a bullet from the prototype Rakasi. Their high-gravity, land-based evolution also permitted the strength required to personally wear armor, usually only found on vehicles amongst the Kaffel. Among their most impressive and terrifying Middle Age inventions was that of plate armor. The powerful metallic plating and impassive helms made those who wore it look more like sci-fi robots than the lovable alien we'd all come to know. Interesting, Chot hummed, his expression betraying a small degree of concern upon this shocking revelation. Taking down a human armored like that would require vehicle-grade weaponry. Hearing this exclamation, Andrew maintained his mirthless expression. Let's just hope that you guys never have to go to war against my people. The real spectacle, however, was yet to come. By the time the human world wars rolled around, their technology was already well ahead of our own. Comparing their tanks to ours was akin to comparing an adult to a hatchling. It simply wasn't fair. Our modern tanks bore more resemblance to their civilian vehicles than to their own tanks, which looked like impenetrable monsters by comparison. Further stealing the show were fully automatic guns, weapons which created an endless stream of death. Pleasant as the implications of this technology seemed to Chot, I was horrified. Even a single one of these weapons could decimate an entire unit in seconds. I couldn't believe that humans like Andrew would not only create such lethal ordnance, but also employ it against their own. Then we saw the mushroom cloud, and I was left speechless. Speaking in my stead, even Chot seemed mildly perturbed by such a weapon. You weren't exaggerating when you said a hydrogen bomb could devastate entire cities. Offering in reply a sad yet snarky laugh, Andrew continued. That wasn't a hydrogen bomb, he began, pulling up an infographic showing the blast radius of this weapon, followed by one that eclipsed it several times over. That one used nuclear fission. The real hydrogen bombs use fusion and are a few thousand times more powerful. The weapons which followed, while none more ultimately devastating than nuclear bombs, all completely dwarfed our own military technologies. From drones driven entirely by computers to weaponized satellites, no advancement for humans was beyond weaponization. By the time this documentary had finally concluded, both myself and Chot were speechless for entirely different reasons. Now you can probably understand why I haven't shown this to everyone. Andrew sighed, his eyes lingering on the video's final frame depicting an explosion even larger than that of a hydrogen bomb. I didn't want everyone to think my species was a bunch of warlike supermen. We've had our moments, but overall I like to believe we've gotten more peaceful with time. I understand, Chot muttered solemnly, shamefully averting his gaze from our human friend as he visibly contemplated his next words. I'm sorry, he began awkwardly, looking somewhat ashamed of himself for whatever he was about to apologize for. Salkim has called me to the Golden Nest to debrief him on your species. He wants to know if your kind are a considerable threat. Unfortunately, I will be obligated by oath to share this information with the Prime Minister. I hope you can forgive me for such an indiscretion. Andrew offered no verbal reply to this slight, instead simply nodding in a human gesture of affirmation. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew the truth about what we humans are capable of. You've both been very honest with me since I landed here, and I wanted to return the favor. Though he was speaking to both of us, I couldn't help but notice the way the human's gaze locked onto me in particular. Thank you for showing this to us, I cooed happily, regarding my dear friend with a fondness formerly unfamiliar to me, one I didn't quite understand how to describe. It means a lot that you trust us with the truth. Suddenly, Chot's radio blared with the sounds of barely audible speech. I have to get this, the translator interrupted, stepping out of the main command center as he pressed the device to his ear and began to speak in a quiet, conspiratorial tone. That reminds me, Andrew hummed, exiting the video application and navigating his cursor over toward one which depicted an envelope of some sort. My message to humanity won't arrive for another century, but I guess we can at least see if there's anything of note on their old broadcasts. Care for a listen? He asked. Nodding along excitedly with this course of action, I watched with deep curiosity as Andrew clicked upon the application and navigated to a message labeled as arriving a week ago. Hovering a shaky finger over the play button, my human sighed to himself. Let's hope whatever this is ends up being good news. Nervously, he clicked the button and a message began to play. This is Boris Johann, Chief of the United Nations Space Agency. Today, me and my colleagues have successfully made the greatest breakthrough in space travel since the Pride ship. Our prototype quantum transmitter and receiver successfully ferried a message to and from Alpha Centauri in just over 2 years, something that would have taken 10 for traditional radio communications. With this technology, we have successfully gotten one step closer to instantaneous communication across colonies and eventually a truly star-spanning human empire. Andrew's eyes widened with excitement as he rapidly navigated to the STEM database, used primarily as a source of blueprints for our technological endeavors, and typed in the word quantum. Instantly, a handful of designs flashed on screen, with many of them marked as theoretical. However, the entry at the top bore no such indicator. It read, Quantum Communications Device. Vavi, he breathed, spinning around and standing to face me, startling the both of us with the realization of how close we now stood. Do you understand what this means? What? I asked, unable to will myself away from the starlight in his eyes. Quantum communicators can deliver messages at 4C. If we can build one on our end, I can deliver a message to Earth within my lifetime. I could kiss you right now, I'm so happy. Well then, why don't you? I chirped, the words leaving my lips faster than my brain could properly clear them for transit. To my surprise, terror, excitement, and everything in between, he actually started to lean in. Our lips were mere centimeters apart when Chot loudly barged back inside, immediately startling the both of us into looking away from each other and toward our tired-looking friend. Get yourselves packed, he began, sounding out of breath. Perhaps a lengthy argument with whoever he was just speaking to. Wait, why? I asked fretfully, worried beyond reason that the top brass were about to try and kick me out of the project again for some inane purpose. The Prime Minister wants to speak with Andrew directly. Chot breathed tiredly, scratching the top of his crest in a gesture I presumed he had picked up from our alien friend's frequent habit of doing the same. He's expecting us within 2 days. I understand that you two have a bond of sorts, and so I had to convince them to let you come along, Vavi. Finally, after a few moments of standing speechlessly, Andrew cocked his head at Chot and with his mouth agape replied, I'm sorry, what?